Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Dark Side of MonoGame. This time we're going to be covering using XML with your content project and pulling it into your game. This allows you to generate content outside of the game, completely free of charge, and then pull it in for doing things like levels or walls of text or other things. And obviously, before we get kicked off, solidarity, brothers and sisters, as we must always do on this channel. Anyway, so what we're going to do, we're going to look at, generally speaking, how to use XML. This has been hotly demanded. I've been, I don't know, chased down the street saying, why haven't you not looked at doing XML? So I eventually succumbed, and this is what we got. And we're going to covering building XML data classes. This is important because then this is how your game reads the data that you're going to pull in through the XML. How we can add XML into a content project, making sure your content project recognizes the XML and understands the data it's passing, which is very, very key. A quick overview of how we work with collections and arrays if you want to do. We're going to do a few different ways of doing that. And generally speaking, just how we can build that XML. Now you can fill it out and a few other little tips and tricks along the way, especially if you're using Visual Studio and things don't work always right. So we'll throw some things in. But anyway, so why would we use the content pipeline to load XML? I mean, we can just write our own serializers, do all those things. But when you're loading XML, I mean, XML processing is heavy. No matter which serial you're using, if you're running a game at runtime, unless you've been extremely smart with the way these things work, it can take a lot of processing power. So one real big advantage is the fact that you're offloading all that loading time. You're pre-generating, preloading all this XML. It's already readily serialized down into a binary format that just streams to the game through the content pipeline or managed by that. So it's completely offloaded, saving you time in game that you desperately need. Another big advantage is the fact that we can actually validate the XML schema in advance. So if you want to have a separate team working generating this XML, they don't need all of the game to be able to build and test things. They just need the content pipeline tool and the data classes library. You can give it to them, start working on it, and they don't need to worry about it. You don't need to worry about that when running the game. This thing's going to go fall down around your ankles because the XML is wrong. You checked it in advance. And out of this, it's a case of, assets become the same. It's easier to manage and load it. It just works like any other asset, so you can actually use it in the game. And another keen thing to note is the fact that it can also be batched. So if you've got separate content projects for different levels or different scenes or DLC and things like that, it can all be batched into the same content. You're not having to worry about multiple delivery paths for all your different assets and different things. So it's all in one big package. So we're going to switch over to the code and start building it out. Right, and as ever, this session is basically extending on what we have in the XNA Game Studio library. If you've not seen it before, worth checking out. It's simply the XNA Game Studio repository on GitHub. Search and you shall find. Obviously, in here, there's lots of XNA content that was there, and we're extending this now to also include the XML. Now, a good man, Sean Hargreaves, wrote a lot of articles on writing XML, so we've now brought those over into the actual repository as well. In here, there's talk about how to build XML, how to generate it as well, using intermediate serializer. A nice article on everything you need to know, which I'm going to refer to this a few times through the video, and also a nice little comparison between the immediate serializer and the XML serializer. It's important to look at, and it's good information. So you simply go to the wiki, look for Manta Fish. I shall put a link on the screen here, and you'll be able to check it out. So as we're getting started, we're going to, as ever, create a brand new project. I believe in starting from scratch and showing you everything. So let's do that. So if I'm going to do file, new project. Let's pick a platform. We've got MonoGame. I'm using the latest 3.6 build. So, everything I'm showing here, everyone has access to. I'm not going to do an iOS project because that'd be a pain to do. I shall cover, some people have asked about how to build for Android, how to build for iOS, and so on. I'll do separate videos for that in due course. Just give me some time. It takes a fair amount of time to put these videos together. So I'm just going to create a standard, it's a cross-platform project. It's always the most fun. Let's put this somewhere sensible or not. No, let's just put it there. And let's see, nice little XML content project. Interesting, 2017. Now you can start straight away using Git. So if you're doing a real project, I'd highly recommend using that. But hey ho, off we go. It's going to generate the project and be fairly quick. There we go. And I always recommend once you've created a new project, build it first. Just make sure there's nothing else funny going on. There was an issue in the base 3.6 build where the OpenGL project didn't work as it should do. And the simple way around that was simply then to go in, go to manage NuGet, browse for MonoGame, and then install the, whoops, where is it there? Something on NuGet, just to get things right. Just because there was a few issues in there. In the point release, it should all be fixed, but let's not worry about that now anyway. Okay, so we have our project and we want to start building some XML. But before we do anything really, we need to look at what kind of data we're looking at. Now, you can, with MonoGame, generate your data inside your game, but my recommendation is you don't. And you should go and create a brand new project that should be side by side with it. Now, in X8 days, this was a bit of a pain because it meant you had to have a separate library for each platform. But now, because this is MonoGame, we can use these portable class libraries. Now, these are brilliant for everything. If you just want to store code and you want to put it in, then you can. And this is simply going to store all the shared classes that my code's going to use between my main game and my project. And it's down to you about how you do it, how you manage that as it goes on. And easiest thing is we just simply select everything. So I'm going to use 4.5, and I'm just going to build for everything, which means no matter which platform I build for, it's going to be read by this library. In it goes. And let's not forget, whoops, let's add a reference to it to our main game. So anything we create, our game will recognize as well. Okay, so several of these things, they start off a nice brand new like my class, but I don't like that. Let's just get rid of that. And I'm going to go and create a brand new class. It may seem odd deleting just to recreate a brand new one, but this means I get to name it how I want it. So here I've got my XML data, and basically I want my, well, now you can be called wherever you like. It doesn't really matter. It's just down to you and how you want to do it. And you can have a little namespace. Let's get rid of all this. Now, because it's MonoGame and you want it to work, first thing you want to do is to make sure that we also reference the MonoGame portable class library NuGet. That simply means if you want to use any MonoGame style classes like vector2s or times or things like that, it's there. You don't have to. I will state the fact that if you're just using strings, ints, and standard .NET classes, you don't need to worry about it. But in a lot of games, a lot of projects, I always find the fact that there's vector2s and other things that you want to put in there. So you simply go to MonoGame, NuGet, browse MonoGame, and get the MonoGame portable project. It's a nice little bait and switch. There's not actually anything in there at all. It's just making available all the classes and things that you're going to use with MonoGame. But anyway, so here I've got my class. First thing you have to make sure is make sure it's public, because if you're using XML serialization, everything must be public because it's public data. If you need functions to work on this data, keep those in your project, because that's how you're going to interact with those later on. You can always write extension methods, or you can even write the functions in here, but again, it's down to you what you want. So I've just got my XML models in my XML data area. And in here, I'm going to create a new set of data itself. So I'm going to say public string double name. Oh, let's do this properly, Simon. There we go. And okay, so then that's another one just for fun. Max and so there we go. We've got a nice there, and an XML model in itself sounds a bit strange. So I'm going to call it. I'm going to change this to say my level. So this is going to be a bit of XML that's going to describe a level in my game. And it's just going to give it a name and how many enemies are in there. Obviously, it's a completely procedural generated map, so I don't need anything else. But I can always put values in here for that. Make sure we save it. And the first thing we need to do is then build this. Now, building is very important because we're going to consume this project in our MonoGame content project. So then what we want to do, switch over to a content project and open up. Now, if this happens to you, so if you're opening the content project just gives you this, it simply means that the content pipeline editor has not been associated with Visual Studio. I've seen it happen on some instances when it's been installed, not always. But to get around this, we simply right click to open with, find our lovely content pipeline editor tool, and then you can set as default. That means that whenever you double click on this file, it will always open up that content project. So, little tip for you there. So I'm going to close that file. So I open it again now, and I'm going to get my lovely little GUI. There we go. Now, several ways you can get the XML to this. You can either create it manually yourself, or if you want to get started, you can simply add a new item, and there's a lovely little XML file here. And I'm going to say my levels XML. Nice and pretty. So yeah, there it is. There's not really doing much of a build it. Works fine for the moment. But let's go and have a look at this XML itself. And here I can just open with. And if you don't use it already, I recommend you use Visual Studio Code for editing as well because it's pretty. And just as an example, here's one. So it creates you a default XML file. You notice the fact that this has a type of XNA content. We've kept with the standards, so any XNA games can easily port to MonoGame, and there's a nice bit of XNA legacy in there as well. We then have our asset, which is basically the content that we're going to load. And the type on this is important. Now, here's one I made earlier. So similar kind of thing. So I've got my XNA content branch, I've got my asset type, and I've got the data in it itself. Now you see here, the type is important because it's the namespace and the class that you're going to import. And then it's the data you're going to, right? So I'm going to save myself some time here. I'm going to simply copy this over. I'm going to get rid of this namespace. You don't really need it. It's just there by default. Now, the type. Now, the type is important. If I switch back to my Visual Studio project, okay, I've got a namespace of my XML data and a class of my level. And these have to match. If there is any kind of mismatch, MonoGame is simply going to go, I have no idea what you're talking about. Can you please go away and try again? And we're at it. This is extremely important. It's both the namespace and the class. So I get that, and I get my class now. I'm copying them just for fun because I don't want to type it. There. So I've got my level class in my XML data namespace. Let's save that. Now, if you ever want to know why XML VS Code is brilliant, I'm going to go F1 format, and oh look, a nicely formatted XML. Makes life easier. You don't actually need this line here, but I've always kept it in reference. It just makes, and if you're using XML editors of any type, they use these. So anyway, so there's our XML. It's saved in our project. Let's save that. And we've got one level with a max enemies out of basically describing something. Nice and easy. So we switch back to our content pipeline tool. There's one I created earlier. No, this is it. There we go. Now, if I try to build this now, it's going to fail. Simply because it does not know what this my XML data, my level thing is. You've said import something and you've not told it what it is. So remember earlier we built our data project and then we actually built it. And the build is important here because we now need to add a reference to that project to the content pipeline. And it's quite simple. We just open it up and we go back. Go there. And then we've got my XML data project. And then we're going to go to this built folder, built it for debug. there's some discussion really about whether it should be built for debug or for release. Personally, I've always built it for release, the data project, simply because it means the fact that I'm double checking everything when I work, and I'm actually using the real production data. So from developing and changing things, it's not going to break my build. However, if you forget to then build it for release and then you spend half an hour figuring out why your XML is not loading, you may disagree. But anyway, while you're testing, right, developing, leave it as debug. If you want to get into a full production cycle, then I'd suggest using the release version of your project DLL. Anyway, so with that in there, now the content pipeline knows what my XML data my level is. If I go and build this again now, hey, there we go. So there we have now an XML file loaded into content pipe. Now, why is this important? Simply put, the fact that loading XML is generally, especially if it's quite large, very expensive process-wise. You could do an XML serializer in your project, go to the data file, load it up manually, pull it in, deserialize the data. Fine, it works, but it will cause you problems because it is slow. But with the content pipeline doing it, all that work has been done in advance. It's been preloaded. And now you've actually got binary serialized data in the content pipeline in an XMB file ready for your project to consume. And MonoGame already knows what it is. So you're simply loading it. So if we go back to our project now, there we go, there. And we go to our game class. We can now simply go down. Okay, so we'll create a nice little reference to it. So it's my level. I'm going to add a using to it because that's an easy way of doing it. Level. And then down in my content pipeline, I can then simply go level equals content dot load. We know it's on my level. Then I'm going to give it the path to what it is. Now, if you recall from the previous content videos, if you can just simply right click, copy asset path, it saves you any fuss of actually typing it wrong. And then there, and that's done. And then when that loads now, I'm going to run it. It's not really going to do anything, but it's going to have loaded my content in, and it's there to use within the class. Now, obviously, when your XML starts to get a bit bigger and you want to then be able to start generating the XML for you, there's a handy little sneaky trick. Now, thanks to Mr. Sean Hargreaves who showed us this, and that's actually in this Teaching a Man to Fish article. I've updated it on the XNA Game Studio site to actually be more MonoGame-like, but basically it talks about the same thing. So it's talking about creating your data class, and then it talks about actually using some simple code to generate the test data. And I'm, just for fun, I'm going to copy that and put it straight into my project just to show you how easy this is to work. So go down here and go to my program class. If you've not got a program class, it's just whichever is the starting class, or you can call it from game in the initialize just for fun. The only reason it's here is so that you can actually run it. Now, one thing I'm going to seriously go on here is the fact that let's just fix these namespaces. So I use an XML. It's not my test, it's my level. And copy that there. Okay, so that's all well and good, but obviously you don't want that running production code, and especially for this. Now you notice here the intermediate serializer, which is the MonoGame sort of XML serializer. It's a bit better, it's a bit more friendly about how you can serialize data. You can read the articles up on about why it's good. But intermediate serializer is part of the content pipeline, so it's not there as part of your normal game project, and therein it should remain. So when you're doing this testing, you do it, you build it, you then hide it or get rid of it, simply because you don't want this in your live project. So to get access to the content pipeline, it is installed on your machine because you also have the content pipeline tool, and we simply need to add a manual reference to this. Now, the place it's normally located is in here. So it's in your MS build folder along with the MonoGame pipeline tool. So I'm going to copy this path. I'm going to go browse, go to tools, and then go to there. And it's MonoGame content, monogame.framework.content pipeline, DLL. Okay. Once that's in, I just need to then add another using, but I'm actually going to put it as full there. Now, when I run my project, it's also not only going to run, it's also then going to create a new XML file for me using this data. Now, obviously, this is just a blank file, so there's nothing in here. So, really, you want to then be able to go test data dot level name equals my level and test data dot max enemies equals. There's lots of enemies in this level. You are going to die because it's the training level, and that's not how ints work. Aha. So I save that. Now if I run this, again, you don't see anything on screen, but what's happened in the background is that MonoGame has now actually generated the default XML for this. And this is a great way if you just want to create the first instance of that XML thing, you can go and manually edit it. Right, so it's built. Then we need to go and get to it. So if we right click on our project, open file in Windows Explorer, go to our bin, desktop.gl, whichever build release folder we keep going down. And then down here we got our lovely test XML. So here you can see we can compare it to the one we created earlier. There is that detailed out exactly what the project what it is. But that's fine. So there's one XML file. Okay, good. But it's not really much. So one thing obviously we want to be aware of is working with collections. Now there's a few different ways of doing this. And we go back to our XML models. And so I've got a definition for a level. Now, one simple way I can make it so the fact that I've got a collection is I've got another class. And I can simply create an array of my levels. Public, my level array, my levels. Okay, and then if you then serialize instead of my level, you're loading my levels array, and then you create some items. Now, simply, I'm going to show this here because I've got one. Here's one I created earlier. He says so there, and in an array, you're simply creating a data item of levels array, and then loading up those items in there. Now, there's two ways. If it's a standard simple array, or if it's an array of ints, if you read Sean's article, which is on here. So go to down here. I'm going to click on this link here. I'll put the link on the screen for easy access. And you can go through, and this covers all the different data types and things you can load, and different ways you can load it. But if you look at here, I've just created a level array, and then it's just an array of item names, simple as. But you can also go a bit further, and the intermediate serializer does also support collections. So go on here. So okay, and I can then simply either do public list levels. Fix this using reference, and then you can simply have an array of levels. Oops, not levels. Level there. Okay, now you've got a collection that works pretty much similar to the array, except obviously you don't have to redeclare it. And so this is another way of actually getting data in. Now, no right or wrong way. These both work, but what you're going to end up in is a file which contains everything. Now, one thing you have to be really aware of is size of files, and I'll reiterate this later. If you're hundreds of levels and you put it all into one XML file, it's going to start getting bloated. And even with the content pipeline, you're going to start getting issues in loading data. So another handy tip is, instead of going it this way, is that you simply create lots of these. So I've got my level, and then I'm going to create an XML for level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. And then to reference those, I'm going to create a different kind of class, my levels files. And then in here, I'm simply going to have a public string array of level names. I can always have other arrays and things in there. And then I'm simply only going to put it basically as the file names for those levels into that array. And then so then you're going to have XML files for all your individual levels, and then you're going to have one XML file which basically lists out things to load, which also means that you only have to load them when you need them, which makes life a little bit easier. So if we look at our XML, so here we can see the example. So here I've got a collection, and I've got an array called levels. You can see I've just pre-generated some data in there, and then also I've got as a list. And you can see in the XML they look exactly the same. It's there's a class and there's an array of items in there, and then these are each of the individual items adding to it. Whereas if I go down to levels root, okay, so I simply got a list of names, or I can simply do as a list of integers or list of whichever you want actually to do it, and then I'm going to have the individual level XMLs for all the different levels that you're going to do in there. Another way of doing it. So if it's levels, that's a good way of doing it. If it's a catalog of items in your game, you're probably better doing it as a list. It's up to you which one you want to do. All right, if I look at a sample I did, here's another sample I did earlier. So no, I'm going to bring this in. Lots of different things there's there. And then in your game, what you're going to do is then load the actual levels file. So that's the list, the XML with the list of things you're going to load. You're then going to make sure you know what the length of that is, because this is simply an array. And then in there, I'm going to iterate through and load which levels I want. Also make sure the fact that in case you mess up or you spell something wrong, always have some kind of catch up there as well, just to keep things safe. But anyway, that's it. There's lots of different things there. I highly recommend, again, go through these articles. There's 3 articles there. There's a nice comparison between the XML serializer and the actual intermediate serializer that we use in MonoGame. So you can read all of what you want about that, all the differences, what they are between them. This article by far is the best one, because it simply tells you and proofreads you everything you need to know about what type of dating do. There's optional elements. There's whether you allow nulls, what you do with collections, if you're excluding members in a class because you're using them in the game but not in the content, which is highly useful, especially you can use this data at the core of your game. So not everything has to be content loaded. Some things can be actually calculated when the data is put in there or first time it's used. So, but anyway, he says, again, that was me. So what else have we got to consider when we're doing these projects? Generally speaking, the case of if you're doing the XML content, then if it's going to fail building, then generally it's your fault. There's no way of getting around it. You've either the namespace is wrong or something wrong with the content. Yeah, it just comes down to it isn't XNA, it's you. Sorry. When you're building and working with XML, highly recommended you work up front what you're going to do with it, how you're going to structure it, how you're going to interact with it, how you're going to load it. If you don't do this planning up front, then it's a hell of a lot of pain to change later on. So bear that in mind. And obviously the last thing to do with XML is the fact that it's content like anything else. If you start putting gigs of data into XML, it's going to take time to load. So plan ahead, make sure the fact that content's not too large, break it up. So if there's text between different levels, separate it out unless it's like walls of items and things like that. I've been lots of different games do it in lots of different ways. There is no right and wrong answer. It comes down to what works with your game. Be aware, like any other asset, if you're going to have it taking a while to load, it's going to be a pain. But at least with content pipeline, all the pre-generation of the XML is done up front. So you're loading binary content, you're not loading raw XML. So it's already been pre-processed. So you don't get that usual XML processing time if you're using like an XML using XML serializer, sorry. So it makes life a little bit better because you've done all the hard work up front at build time, which is the reason why you'd want to do it this way through the content pipeline. Anyway, so that's been me. I'm going to sign out now and go off and have a nice cup of English tea. I'm not sure what I'm going to have today. It might be a bit of Earl Grey. Or it might have a Lady Grey. That's just me. I'm English, so I like tea. Anyway, so check out the MonoGame.rock site. Get going with MonoGame. And if you have any questions about this video, then leave a comment in the video below. And solidarity, brothers and sisters. I shall catch you again on the flip side. And signing out.